So for our last domain, domain 4, and our last subdomain, domain 4.2, explain the importance of incident response reporting and communication. This objective focuses on managing information flow during security crises when accurate, timely communication can mean the difference between controlled incident response and organizational chaos. Incident response communication operates under unique pressures. Stakeholder anxiety is high. Information is initially incomplete and rapidly changing. Legal and regulatory requirements create constraints, and business continuity depends on effective coordination. This domain teaches you to communicate clearly and authoritatively during crisis situations while maintaining accuracy and legal compliance. IT operations, security analysts, network administrators, and development teams who execute technical response activities and require detailed technical information for effective response are your technical teams. You want to look at your internal stakeholder management. You've got your technical teams. You've got your business operations, those department managers, business unit leaders who make the operational decisions. The executive leadership, you know who that is, the senior management requiring strategic information for the board communication. Your legal counsel, the in-house or the external legal advisors who assess regulatory notification requirements, litigation risks, and legal strategy during incident response. We're still in our internal stakeholder groups. And finally, human resources as part of internal stakeholders. You know who your human resources are. They are often people who need the communication during widespread incidents and coordination of personnel security measures. Now we have our external stakeholder coordination. We've got our customers, our business partners, our regulatory agencies. Those are government bodies requiring instant notification under various compliance frameworks, including data protection authorities and sector-specific regulators. We have law enforcement, federal, state, local agencies, where incidents involve criminal activity, national security implications, or cross-jurisdictional investigation requirements. We might have cyber insurance carriers. In that case, our external group are insurance providers. So we want to look at our communication strategy development, the message coordination, the information security, and the legal compliance. We need consistency across all stakeholder communications while tailoring content and detail level to the specific audience needs and knowledge levels. We need to balance transparency with operational security in our information security requirements. We don't want to provide information that could assist any attackers or compromise any ongoing response activities. We need to meet our regulatory notification requirements for our legal compliance, while at the same time protecting our privileged information and maintaining legal defensibility of communication decisions. So be careful. We've got the incident declaration and escalation, the incident classification levels, systems, the severity levels, the incident types, the escalation triggers, the authority structures. So that's established procedures for who can declare incidents, who can authorize response activities, who can make critical business decisions during response. We have our decision-making frameworks, the incident commander role, the executive decision points, and the legal consultation. The incident commander role is that designated leadership position with the authority to coordinate response activities and make those tactical decisions during the incident response. There's an incident response reporting structure. There's the executive summary, the business impact focus, the decision support, the strategic context, and the actionable recommendations are all a part of that executive summary. There's the 5 W's documentation: who, what, when, where, and why. The recommendations and timeline. Immediate actions or short-term recommendations for containing damage, preventing recurrence, and restoring normal operations. The strategic improvements for long-term recommendations for security enhancement. The implementation timeline, the realistic scheduling for the recommendation improvements, and the resource requirements, the clear identification of personnel, budget, and technical resources needed to implement recommendations. We have impact assessment and evidence communication, where we have our BIA, our business impact analysis. Included in that, we've got our operational impact, our financial impact, our reputational impact, our strategic impact. So we want to understand how incidents affect long-term business objectives and organizational strategy. That is our strategic impact. There is the scope definition and the communication, with the technical scope clearly defining which systems, networks, and applications were affected by incidents. The data scope, what information might have been accessed. The user impact, which employees, customers, and partners were affected. The geographic scope, incident impact across different locations and jurisdictions. And the evidence presentation includes technical evidence, timeline evidence, and impact evidence. Then for communication types and coordination, we have our legal communications with the regulatory notifications, meeting our specific legal requirements, including timelines, content, and documentation standards. The litigation preparation to support the potential legal proceedings. The privilege protection, understanding when and how attorney-client privilege applies to incident response communications. The public relations management, it's our media strategy, the customer communication, and the stakeholder messaging. Balancing transparency with operational security and legal requirements. Maintaining organizational credibility and stakeholder confidence as best as possible. Regulatory and law enforcement coordination. You've got the regulatory reporting, the law enforcement cooperation, and the information sharing, the participating in threat intelligence sharing with industry partners and government agencies when appropriate and legally permissible. And then the post-incident analyses and metrics, the root cause analyses communication, your contributing factor analyses, explaining the underlying factors that enabled incidents in ways that drive organizational improvement rather than individual blame, your system failure analyses, your improvement opportunities, and then your lessons learned documentation with the process evaluation, the communication assessment, the organizational learning, extracting insights that inform future preparedness and response capability development, then our performance metrics and KPIs, the mean time to detect, the mean time to respond, the mean time to remediate, the alert volume management, and the trend analyses. Your domain 4.2 test strategy tips, understanding incident communication questions. Domain 4.2 questions focus on appropriate communication strategies during high-pressure incident situations rather than technical incident response activities. You'll have key question patterns like during incident response, which stakeholder should be notified first? You want to consider legal and regulatory notification requirements. Think about the stakeholder authority and decision-making responsibilities. Evaluate business continuity and operational coordination needs, and focus on stakeholders who can authorize critical response decisions. You might see a question like, which information should be included in incident communication to? Here you got to consider your audience knowledge level and the decision-making authority. Think about the legal and confidentiality requirements. Evaluate the timing and information completeness versus the urgency, and focus on information that enables appropriate stakeholder responses. And you might see a question like, when should external stakeholders be notified about incidents? For answering that, you've got to think about the regulatory notification requirements and timelines, the business relationship and contractual obligations. Evaluate reputational and competitive implications. Focus on legal compliance while protecting the business interests. For stakeholder management questions, you're thinking about authority assessment, information needs, timing requirements, and legal obligations. Ask yourself questions like, who has decision-making authority for different aspects of incident response? What information does each stakeholder need for effective decision-making? When do different stakeholders need information for effective response? What notification requirements affect stakeholder communication, timing, and content? For your crisis communication questions, you've got urgency versus accuracy to think about, operational security, legal protection, and stakeholder confidence. You'll ask yourself the following questions to effectively handle this. Ask yourself how balance speed of communication with information accuracy. What information could compromise ongoing response activities if it was disclosed? How do communication decisions affect legal defensibility and privilege protection? And how can communication maintain trust while acknowledging serious security issues? And for any metrics and KPI questions, there's performance measurement, improvement demonstration, stakeholder value, and continuous improvement to think about. And ask yourself these questions. What aspect of incident response effectiveness needs quantitative measurement? How can metrics show incident response capability development over time? What metrics are meaningful for different organizational audiences? And how do metrics drive incident response program enhancement? Study strategies for domain 4.2. Learn crisis communication principles. Study how to communicate effectively under pressure while maintaining accuracy and legal compliance. Understand regulatory requirements. Learn notification timelines and content requirements for major compliance frameworks. Practice stakeholder analyses. Develop skills in identifying and prioritizing different stakeholder communication needs during crisis situations. Study real incident communication. Examine published incident response communications to understand effective approaches and common mistakes. The common exam scenarios, we've got type 1, it might be crisis communication timing, questions about when and how to communicate during active incidents. For these, you'll want to consider regulatory notification deadlines and legal requirements. Think about stakeholder coordination and decision-making needs. Evaluate operational security and ongoing response protection, and focus on maintaining stakeholder confidence while managing crisis. The scenario type 2, audience-specific communication. Questions about tailoring incident communications to different stakeholders. Consider audience knowledge level and decision-making authority. Think about information relevance and actionability for specific groups. Evaluate confidentiality and security requirements. And focus on enabling appropriate stakeholder responses and support. And finally, another example scenario type here, you might have post-incident communication questions about communicating lessons learned and improvement plans. You'll focus on organizational learning and capability development. Handle this by considering how to drive improvement without assigning blame. Think about stakeholder engagement in improvement activities and evaluate metrics and success measurement communication. Some common trap answers to avoid are information overload. Avoid communication approaches that overwhelm stakeholders with excessive technical detail during crisis situations. Premature communication. Do not communicate incomplete or unverified information without appropriate caveats, warnings, and uncertainty acknowledgement. Legal exposure. Avoid communication approaches that create unnecessary legal liability or compromise incident response effectiveness. Stakeholder confusion. Do not use inconsistent messaging across different stakeholder groups without considering coordination requirements. Your success tips for Domain 4.2. Remember that incident response communication occurs during high-stress situations when clear thinking may be compromised by time pressure and organizational anxiety. Focus on understanding how communication decisions affect both immediate incident response effectiveness and long-term organizational relationships and trust. Practice thinking about incident communication from multiple stakeholder perspectives to understand different information needs and decision-making requirements. Understand that effective incident communication requires balancing transparency with operational security, legal compliance, and business protection requirements. Domain 4.2 tests your ability to manage information flow during crisis situations when communication mistakes can have serious business, legal, and operational consequences. The key insight for Domain 4.2 is that incident response communication is crisis management that requires systematic approaches to information sharing, stakeholder coordination, and organizational protection during high-pressure situations when normal communication processes may be inadequate. That is your last lecture for this course. Well done. Hopefully you're taking every one of these quizzes and going through these details that are a huge part of the learning process. And now you'll have the final 2 practice tests to take care of. And a lot of that is a teaching process. Make sure you're reading carefully, that you're reading all the explanations. Why is this correct? Why is this incorrect? Read that expanded explanation. All of this is going to be tremendously helpful. Personally, myself and many other people, we find that the key to passing these tests, to passing these official certification exams, is taking practice tests. So yes, we watch a lot of video courses, listen to a lot of things, read a lot of books, sure. But what really nails it for us is getting that experience with the practice tests. There's almost nothing more important than taking practice tests over and over again, and not just taking them, but really reading those feedback responses of why things were correct and why things were incorrect. So I wish you the best of luck. I hope you got a lot out of this course, that you derived a lot of good exam strategies that you can put into practice, that when you start the official exam and start looking at those questions, not find yourself as intimidated as you would otherwise have if you hadn't taken this course. That is my hope. Good luck and enjoy continuing on this cybersecurity cybersecurity learning journey. I have to tell you, it's never over, so I hope you enjoy it as much as possible.